Gazing into space was a natural interest of mine as a kid. My first real big present was a telescope. I was out there on my lawn for every astronomical event. My dad was always right there with me. We saw the Perseids, supermoons, planets. I got better and better telescopes. My dad and I would even go on camping trips just to see some faraway meteor showers. Things were great until I was about 12 years old. My dad vanished. Not a word to my mom. Not a word to me. No one saw him on the day he disappeared. We filed a missing person report, but even now, 10 years later, absolutely nothing has come of it. I still remember the last message he sent me, the night before he disappeared. He took a high-res picture of the Big Dipper, but there was one star that wasn't supposed to be there. He asked me if I could identify it. I couldn't manage to figure out what that star was. Never seen it on another picture of the Big Dipper. After he disappeared, I pretty much quit stargazing. It felt so empty without him. It wasn't worth my time. However, this Halloween weekend of 2021, I heard about this huge Aurora Borealis event in North America. All the telescopes I owned as a kid were sold, but that was an impressive phenomenon you could see with your naked eye. I had plans for a Halloween party on Sunday. However, I figured on Saturday I could drive out to some dark place and catch a glimpse of it. I asked my friend Michelle if she wanted to come, but she was busy all weekend. Typical. At about 10 p.m., I drove out to a hiking trail with no light pollution. As I drove in, there was literally no one there. Of course, that was understandable. It was -5 degrees. I had on a winter coat, a beanie, and a pair of mittens. I could already see the Aurora Borealis, but I figured I could hike up for a better view. It was dark out and kinda unnerving to be hiking alone in the wilderness, but I had bear spray. Still, that didn't stop me from almost jumping out of my skin hearing a branch crack behind me. It must have been nothing, or at least nothing I could see. When I almost tripped on a root hiking up, I decided to turn on my phone's flashlight. But even though I had it fully charged when I left, it was at 5%. I cursed to myself. Shitty phone batteries, am I right? I figured I'd better save the battery I had in case I needed to make a call. Aside from that, the climb was actually pretty relaxing. It took me about 30 minutes before I reached a clearing in the trail. The view was to die for. The colors were vivid and the lights danced so nicely. I spent a long time looking at it, just sort of losing myself in the spectacle. I figured I'd take a picture to show my friends, but my phone was dead. I let out a heavy sigh. My breath formed a cloud in the cold. It was the sensible thing to head back to my car now, so I figured I'd just take one last look at the Aurora Borealis, then head back. There was something there I hadn't seen the first time I looked though. A super bright star. It shined brightly even against the lights. I don't know why, but I had this pit in my stomach looking at it. At first I assumed it was the International Space Station, but it was moving so oddly that it couldn't be. It was also getting brighter and brighter. Maybe I was just in shock, but it took me what felt like forever to clue into the fact that it was getting closer. This deep buzzing sound filled the air as a violent light beamed down onto where I was standing. It was so loud I thought I might go deaf, and so bright I thought I might go blind. I could barely see, but there was a massive black and violet triangle hovering above me. It was so surreal, it was almost like a dream. Then suddenly all at once, the sound stopped. Its brightest lights shut off. There was nothing left but the ship, and the low humming it emitted. The bottom of the ship folded open in 3 directions towards its corners, and something began to descend weightless through the air down towards me. Tall, gray, thin men with large black soulless eyes. Lucky for me, my flight or fight reflex finally kicked in, and I chose flight. I bolted out of there the fastest I've ever run in my life. I could hear those aliens behind me, chittering and making ethereal hissing noises. I could tell they were coming after me by the noises they made getting louder, but I couldn't hear them running. They moved in complete silence, save for their otherworldly vocalizations. I was running for my life down that hiking trail, screaming for help. Just my luck though, I tripped on a root sticking out of the trail and fell flat on my face. I moved quickly to get back up, but even though I heard nothing, they were already upon me. One of them was standing over me, doing nothing but staring. It began to reach out for me with its long, gray fingers. I thought fast and sprayed that thing in the face with my bear spray. I wasn't sure if it would work, but the bear spray made it stumble back and scream. That alien had such a loud, shrill scream that my ears began ringing in my head. Even though it hurt, the adrenaline kept me going, and I continued my sprint down the mountain. I managed to reach the parking lot and quickly unlocked my car, then jumped in. I started it, and the headlights illuminated 4 of the aliens standing at the start of the trail. They were so tall, gray, but in a way I've never seen before. Their inscrutable eyes stared into me as I backed out of the parking lot and sped into the safety of the highway. On the drive home, I realized my ears were bleeding, and I could barely hear anything. I decided to drive to the hospital to get checked out. I made some shit up about listening to my music too loud. They clearly didn't buy it. It was late, however, so they didn't bother questioning it. They stuffed some cotton in my ears and told me to wait for a doctor to examine me. About 20 minutes later, the doctor showed up and took a look into my ears. There was a grim expression on his face as he finished the exam, and he told me I'll have permanent hearing damage. My tears started to well up. The doctor said he'd give me some time and left. I started crying. I could barely hear my own sobs, but I spent about 5 minutes there. It wasn't just losing my hearing that made me cry. It was the stress of the whole experience. I couldn't get their eyes out of my head. I eventually managed to collect myself and got up. The doctor told me I'll need hearing aids. He referred me to a hearing specialist and sent me on my way. I laid in my bed that night, unable to sleep with all the thoughts in my head. I was looking through old photos on my phone, and I saw that picture my dad texted me of the Big Dipper. Maybe it's my imagination, but I could have sworn that that out-of-place star glowed with a violet hue. Hey everyone, I would just like to give a caution before reading that the imagery is quite descriptive on here, so if you can't handle gore well, I'd like you to avoid this story. Now that I gave a heads up, I can begin the story. I was about 8 or 9 when this happened to me. At the time, using a computer was still a new thing for me. We are roughly talking about 12 years ago, where as a kid, you only used a computer or in my case, my grandma's laptop, to play games and simply search dumb stuff on the internet. Now, a little context. I never really told this to anyone, because it's kind of a tricky conversation to come to, and the deep web at the time was pretty much still unknown where I lived. I remember that a couple of times my uncle, who we lived with and who was in his 20s, used to borrow my grandma's laptop as his computer was still extremely basic at the time. Whenever he finished, he would just return it to my grandma, and she would never question anything that he downloaded. Looking back now, they should have password protected the computer or shut me away from it, because this shit was traumatizing. I remember looking at a blackish icon on the desktop. I don't remember the name of it, but I was curious what it was. Now looking back, I'm not actually sure what it was. So if anyone has an idea, feel free to drop it in the comments. When I clicked it, it brought up a Firefox type of browser. Everything looked the same. Nothing was off. At the time, we used to have a Hungarian form as front page, as we didn't know much about Google. So we would just search stuff through that engine and it would work just fine. Naturally, nothing seemed off. However, when I tried to search up some animal videos, because I wanted to watch cute animals, I came across an English title, which at the time was gibberish to me, apart from this one word, gorilla, which is pretty much the same thing in Hungarian. So I clicked on it, and oh boy, I wish I never did that. The browser took me to a website which was completely black and had a red counter on the bottom left. There wasn't too much time left, about 3 to 4 minutes, so I thought I would just wait, as maybe it was a buffering time, which was extremely believable because our internet was utter shit. Even now, when I think about it, my heart rate increases and I just feel sick to my stomach. The counter stopped at 0, and the video began. I saw this girl. To my best guess, she must have been around 17 to 23. Just casually laying on a mattress on a floor, then she sat up. It was kind of hard to tell much detail as the room was mostly dark and there was only just a slight red light that barely made anything visible. The pixels didn't make it any easier to see either. I felt as if it was streamed and filmed at 360p. It felt like she was waiting for someone to come in. She was completely naked and it gave off the vibe that she was paid to do the deed, or at least, that's how it came off. Suddenly, a chair door was pulled up on the left side of the screen and I saw the gorilla walk out. At this time, my heart was beating so fast that I was surprised that I didn't pass out. All the alarms were going off, but me as a dumbass 8-year-old, I wanted to continue to watch the video. The gorilla first seemed shocked, then it became extremely aggressive and charged at the girl, clawing her eyes out and ripping her chest off. I saw the blood drip everywhere and the gorilla started eating the body, which was by now motionless. The shock wore off, and that's when I said, "Nope," and closed down the laptop very quickly. I sat in the corner and cried for a good half hour. And I realized that I should have probably closed the tab so I don't get told off. With my shaky hands, I opened the laptop and I was met with a lost connection to the server error page. I could never erase this shit out of my head and always dreamt about it at the time as it gave me big time trauma. But until this day, I am scared to share this story with anyone, because I don't want them to think I was a psycho and just made up this story because I want attention or something else. Please, if you ever saw this and got scared for life, Please, for the love of God, tell me that I wasn't the only one who saw this. I've known Chris since elementary school, and during the 2 years we lived together in this apartment, he hasn't changed much. He's still into sci-fi and fantasy, still a little bit shy and awkward around new people. He still struggles with weight and confidence issues, and he's still one of the most thoughtful people I know. Or at least, he was until recently. Between my dead-end warehouse job and family drama, I've got my own issues. But I try to help Chris with his problems just as he always been there for me during mine. I was the one who first suggested to Chris that he use dating apps to make friends and maybe find something more. It had worked for me in the past, and I figured that if Chris could message back and forth a bit to build up his confidence, he might have a little more success. That makes this my fault, at least partially. But let's face it, I was worried about the guy. He hadn't met anyone new since high school, and the recent pandemic limited his options even more. Without access to the game shops and conventions that were usually the only place he felt comfortable socializing, Chris retreated further and further into shell. He still talked my ear off, just like old times, but I was worried about what might happen if I moved out or started dating someone seriously myself. Chris wouldn't have anyone left. Maybe I pushed him too hard. Maybe I ignored the signs. It's not like the profile he showed me looked photoshopped or fake. The girl had more than one picture, and she looked normal enough. She could even carry on a conversation, although the messages Chris showed me were a bit strange. It was like he'd been messaging back and forth with a dictionary. I figured she was just being formal. After all, maybe she was a little shy too. It's true that her grin was a little big, and her eyes seemed so wide and eager, but that could have just been a trick of the light. I didn't want to discourage my pal from his first opportunity in years, just based on some weird vibe I was getting. She had suggested that they meet, and I told Chris to go for it. That was about 3 days ago. On the night of their date, I remember smirking when the clock passed midnight. My buddy Chris had finally scored. I was still up gaming in the living room when Chris came in around 3 a.m. When he ignored my question and walked dreamily toward his bedroom, I figured he was just tired, or hopefully, too pleased to speak. Even when Chris hadn't left his room by 2 p.m. the next day, I wasn't concerned. He had a late night. Sleeping late was typical Chris behavior too, and I was gonna be late for my shift. I didn't start to feel concerned until I came home late that night. The kitchen had been ransacked so badly, I thought we'd been broken into, and the smell coming from the bathroom could have gagged a maggot. A half-eaten can of refried beans was splattered like blood across the floor. Drawers and cabinets hung open. Ripped open plastic packages and crumbs were everywhere. The mess led straight to Chris's room, but his door was shut tight. I was exhausted from 8 hours of lugging cardboard boxes around the warehouse, so I made a mental note to talk to Chris about his cleaning and eating habits before collapsing into bed. The ransacked kitchen was unchanged when I woke up. With a sigh, I knocked on my roommate's bedroom door. "Chris?" I asked. No response. I opened the door with a grimace. This room, too, smelled awful, and with the blinds closed and lamp off, it was incredibly dark. I could barely make out the shape of Chris's chest rising and falling beneath the bed sheets. He was breathing like someone on a respirator. "Chris?" I tried again, a little louder. I stepped in something and cursed as I made my way toward the bedside lamp. the only source of light in Chris's room. I felt for the switch and clicked it on. The room was an even worse disaster than the kitchen, but it was nothing compared to Chris. He looked swollen. His skin puffed out as though he were having an allergic reaction, so much so that it seemed he couldn't even open his eyes. His skin was covered in sweat and the remains of food, and his belly beneath the sheets. It was so large it seemed distended. I didn't have much time to stare, however, because Chris's inflated hand started flailing around for the light. He smacked it blindly, plunging the room back into darkness. A horrible wheezing sound came from his throat. "Chris, dude, you're scaring me," I shouted. "What's going on?" Bloated fingers closed around my neck. It was like Chris was trying to pull me toward his face and shove me away at the same time. I was shaken like a rag doll. Since when had my roommate been so strong? I fell into the disgusting trash on the floor and hurried for the door, slamming it behind me. That plain white door with my roommate's name written on the chalkboard had seemed so plain and ordinary just a few minutes ago, but now it was like the doorway to some awful nest. I kept my eyes fixed on the knob, and I realized I was horrified of seeing my roommate in the light if he came out. I tried to plan my next move, wondering if I could call for help. Chris didn't have any medical insurance though. With a slam, my roommate's door flew open. I squeezed my eyes shut and froze as he barreled towards me and past me to the bathroom. I peered around the corner and saw my roommate on his knees in front of the toilet in a position I was all too familiar with. I almost felt relieved. Was that it? Just a hangover and an allergic reaction to some weird cocktail? I went over to Chris, ready to put my hand on his shoulder and ask him what I could do for him. He was retching, but nothing was coming out. At first, that was before I noticed the enormous bulge in Chris's throat. It was like something that had been growing in his stomach was finally making its way out. As sickening as the sight was, I didn't react right away. Not until I saw the first tendril, white and nerve-like, probing out of my friend's mouth. More followed. They reached out blindly for anything they could touch, including me. I shrieked and backed away from the lengthening forest of pale tendrils. It seemed impossible that the writhing mass in front of me could have all fit inside of Chris, but what they were dragging out of him was even worse. The tendrils arranged themselves like spider legs, pushing against the bathroom counter, the toilet, and the walls. Chris collapsed as they heaved something out of his throat. It was a fetus, but not like any human baby that I'd ever seen. For one, it was fully alive and mobile, twisting to get free of the tendrils it had used to escape from my friend's body. It gnawed on itself until it got free, landing on the floor with a sickening splat. Before I could react or even scream, the gooey, squirming, horrifically human-looking thing scurried away down the bathroom vent. The forest of tendrils that had birthed it began to wither and cave in over my friend's body. I grabbed Chris's wrist, but I didn't need the lack of pulse to tell me that he was dead. Much too late, I called emergency services. The first responders were ordinary police, but when they saw the scene in my bathroom, they made another call, and the two men who arrived a few minutes later didn't look like the agents of any law enforcement agency that I'd ever heard of. They didn't even identify themselves, instead relying on the police to convince me to talk. Not that I needed much prodding. I was already blabbling like a lunatic, and I would have done or said anything to get an explanation for what I'd just seen. They asked me if I shared any fluids or any meals with my roommate recently. They asked if we kissed, or if he put his mouth on my body at all. Then, without answering a single one of my questions, they sterilized the place and left, taking what was left of Chris with them. The two agents had a hushed conversation beneath the window of the second-floor apartment. I couldn't hear all of it, but I did catch two phrases. "My God," and "They found a new way to breed." I have been working abroad in Japan for about a month. I teach English as a second language at a nice high school in the countryside that is only a couple of hours from Tokyo by train. I began my tenure here as an assistant teacher to another American expat. She had been teaching at this school in Japan for about 2 years before I arrived. We'll call her Clara. After we met, Clara insisted that she be my mentor. There was only one other native English speaker expat at the school anyway, and he is from Australia. For some reason, I got the feeling Clara was a couple of years older than me, as if she'd done the same thing I had and left the US right after graduating from college. When we talked between classes, I could tell Clara was smart. I'd say wise beyond her years, to the point that she seemed as smart or smarter than many of my old professors from my university in the US. Most of my days initially were spent sitting in her classes, taking notes, and helping her assist students in grade papers. Before I get into what I'm going to say next, let me just say that I am not a simp, nor have I ever been. I was sure that Clara was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and not in the way of classic beauty, or what might cause her to have a lot of suitors or something, but in a way that could have gotten a cult following. It extended to her mannerisms and how she phrased things. It was hypnotic. I literally had to keep my head still from tracking her as she moved, as if I were one of those cobras being charmed by a snake charmer. One day, when she had left her coat behind in the teacher's office to set something up in a classroom, I tore off a piece of notebook paper and scribbled the following note from the Japanese-based meme, "Notice me, Senpai." Leaving it unsigned, I placed it in her coat pocket. She either didn't comment on it to me or didn't notice it until a few days later. Eventually, she mentioned it almost casually in the middle of our conversation. "It was me," I said. I tried to shrug it off, but knew, from the heat in my face, that I was probably blushing. It was a Friday afternoon, and we had been doing some grading and planning for Monday's classes in the office that us expats shared. The Australian guy, we'll call him Charlie, had already left for the day. I'd never been that bold before. The old me might have faltered and said, I knew nothing about the note. Hell, the old me would have never left the note in her coat pocket to begin with. To my surprise, Clara smiled when I told her I was the author of the note. I had expected her to be creeped out, other than when we'd first met and she had insisted of being my mentor. She hadn't shown any interest in me beyond our professional work. "Alright," Clara said. "I'm noticing you. What do you want?" She was still smiling. It was like it melt a hole straight through my chest and was burning the wall beyond. "Well," I said, "for starters, wanna hang out? I mean, outside of work? How about we skip to the part where we go out on a date?" Clara said, her smile burning a hole through me, her eyes trapping me inside them. I said, "Okay, let's see. How about sometime next week?" "Tonight," Clara said. "Let's hop on a train to Tokyo. I know of this great tempura restaurant there. You said you like seafood, right? Yeah, I said. I'm surprised you remembered. Oh, I've noticed a few things about you before, she said. Well, okay, I said. I was feeling pretty darn flattered. Not to mention on cloud 9. This wasn't the way things were supposed to have gone at all. I was expecting to have been rejected. We agreed to meet at the train station 8:15. With the time it would take to get to Tokyo, it seemed Clara wanted to eat late, which was fine by me. Whatever the hell she wanted was fine by me. When she stepped up onto the train station platform, her outfit, stunning and elegant at the same time, almost knocked me down onto the train tracks. Every time her lashes fluttered, like the wings of a butterfly, I felt my heart skip a beat. I can't remember what all was said between us on the train to Tokyo, but I imagine there was a lot of gibberish coming out of my mouth. She wore lipstick the color of blood. I felt my own blood boiling beneath the surface. Once we got to Tokyo, she hailed a cab and we made our way to the restaurant. The restaurant was dimly lit, the lanterns a low pulsed glow that blurred the other objects in the room like something out of an impressionist painting. The waiter came over to us, handing us menus. "What are you thinking?" Clara said to me after a few minutes, as if we'd been at this for a while, as if this wasn't our first date. "I'm thinking how lucky I am," I said, grinning like an idiot. "No," she said, shaking her head with her own smirk. "I mean, what are you thinking about ordering?" "Oh," I said. "Oh." I looked at the menu. "Ebi no tempura. That's shrimp tempura, right?" "Yeah," she said. "The classic. I think I'll go with that myself." When the waiter came back and Clara ordered, she asked the waiter if the chef put garlic on the shrimp tempura. She had been here before, frequently, but she always liked to double check, she said. She winked at me between talking to the waiter, though the waiter seemed to understand English pretty well. Clara even asked him in Japanese. The waiter said yes in Japanese. I thought to acknowledge Clara's statement, but then he shook his head no. Somewhere along the line, there must have been some confusion with the order. My shrimp tempura came out with distinct garlic flavor. Maybe they thought Clara wanted them to add garlic to mine. She seemed okay with hers. I didn't ask because I was afraid it was a bad breath thing that Clara didn't like. In between eating, I surreptitiously popped a few mints from my pocket to try to mask the garlic on my breath. As we finished our meal, I asked whether Clara wanted to swing by Akihabara while we were in Tokyo for some late-night gaming and manga shopping. She replied in the affirmative. Excellent, I thought. She might be an otaku like me. She paid the bill before I realized what was happening. Outside, while I was trying to hail a cab, she nudged me, smiled suggestively, and pointed to a nearby dark alleyway. "Let's take a little detour," Clara said. I nearly tripped over my feet as I followed. I popped a few more mints just to be sure she wouldn't take offense at my garlic breath. We went a little ways down the windowless alleyway until the lights from the rest of the city were a haze, a little separate pocket of existence behind us. Clara slammed me against a wall. Things are proceeding rather quickly, I thought. Is it too fast? Her lips touched my neck. Teeth, biting down. At first I laughed, then I screamed. Warm blood. That blood in me that had been too eager to come to the surface pitter-pattered against the ground like a light rain. It might have been a downpour if not for Clara beginning to drink at the source. Before I could think to push her away, she recoiled on her own, staggering. "Garlic," she spluttered. I heard a dry heave. I saw twinkling demonic eyes in the dark. And then I saw her backside as she ran down the other end of the alleyway, faster than I'd ever seen a human move before, squeezing both hands on the side of my neck to try to stop the blood flow. I jogged out to the other end of the alleyway. I called out for help in English and in the Japanese I knew. Some nice people pouring out of the restaurant helped me get a cab to a nearby hospital. The hospital disinfected and patched up my neck, gave me some antibiotics, and put some IVs in me to replenish what I'd lost from bleeding. As infatuated as I had been with Clara, I gave a full report to an English-speaking police officer about what had happened. I'm not sure if he believed it. The following Monday, Clara was not at the high school. No one else that I've talked to since has seen her. I haven't told the school about what happened. I figured, for now at least, I'll keep that between myself and the police. Also, something else is going on that made me a little more reluctant to talk about these things. Nearly a week has passed since Clara attacked me. The wound on my neck should be healing. Maybe it is. Maybe the throb I feel in my neck, a throb I hadn't felt before, is just a natural part of the process. But now, as my own eyes become more and more sensitive to the sunlight, often triggering migraines and nausea, and my skin begins to burn too easily in the sun, I'm reminded of a little detail about Clara that had somehow gotten lost in the mix of my infatuation with her. She'd always been in the teacher's offices before I got there, and she was always there when I left, no matter how early I arrived or how late I went home, as if she had gotten to school before sunup and had left after sundown every day. I'm sharing this as a warning. Please don't buy a board game called Ghost Call, no matter how legit it looks. I found the game at a 7-Eleven store on the outskirts of my town. It doesn't get much business, but I like to drink their Slurpees. That particular day, there was no one at work, but the store was open, so I went in to check if anything had happened to Claire, the clerk. I couldn't find her anywhere, so I was about to leave the store because I assumed it was closed, and Claire forgot to lock the door. But something caught my eye. There was a stack of green and white boxes on the shelf closest to me. I come here every day, and I never noticed the boxes. I picked one up. It was a board game, and selling for $2 too. Great deal. I knew the store was closed, so I left a $2 note on the counter and left. When I brought the game home, I got a better look at it. It was a white box with green streaks along the edges. On the top of the box was a cartoon boy and a cartoon girl laughing at a telephone. Weird. The box was wrapped in clear plastic like those legit board games you can buy for $40 at toy shops. I opened it up, and inside was a red telephone, the old kind, with the spinny dial, which was on the box as well, and a few cards with numbers on them. On the back of the box were the instructions. This is where it gets weird. I'll try to say it out loud for you. How to play. On the first turn, pick up a card and dial the number on the card. Subsequently, go from left to right. Each pick up a card. On the back of the card, there is a question. On your turn, dial the number chosen on the first turn and ask the question into the phone. The game ends when everyone has had a turn. Simple game, though it sounded really stupid. But the weird part were the warnings, written in bright red with a marker next to the instructions. Warning: stop playing if You start getting silent phone calls. You start getting phone calls on your personal phone with the number you chose on the first round. You have played 3 rounds. You feel an uncomfortable presence in the room. You hear unusual sounds that you shouldn't hear. Example, door knocking, water dripping. Only start playing again 24 hours later. I started getting chills, but it looked like somebody wrote those warnings to make the game more appealing, so I didn't worry much. That night, I called my friends over to play the game with me. I figured it would be fun. We would laugh at how stupid the game was. I called over 3 friends, Amos, Zoe, and Elliot. They have been my best friends since kindergarten. When they all arrived, we sat on the floor with the game in the middle of us. I read the rules and warnings to them, and we all laughed. It really seemed like a really bad advertising strategy. On the first turn, Elliot picked up a card with the number 67281209. He then picked up another card and dialed the number on the phone. He called it and asked, "What's your favorite food?" Suddenly, he dropped the phone. He had a startled look on his face. "Whoa," he said. "That's fucking creepy." Now all of us were excited. It was my turn next. I picked up a card and dialed the number. "What is your mother's name?" I asked into the phone. "Maria," the phone said in my voice. I dropped the phone in surprise, same as Elliot. Not only did it reply in my voice, my mother's name is actually Maria. I laughed. It was so creepy, but I had no explanation as to how the phone got my voice and my mother's name. Next was Amos's turn. He dialed the number and asked, "How many siblings do you have?" He had the same reaction as Elliot and I. So did Zoe. It was all good fun, so we decided to do another round. The next round was less fun. Elliot picked another number and called it, asking, "How old are you?" We waited for a while before Elliot said, "It's not responding." I knew it was one of the warnings, but it was just advertising strategy, right? As time went by, more things happened. Zoe started getting calls on her personal phone from the number we dialed. That was creepy, but we didn't stop. Amos started crying. We didn't know why. It was also creepy, but he calmed down and we just continued with the game. All we cared about was fun. Soon, we had played 3 rounds, then 4, then 5. But when we started the 6th round, I started feeling uncomfortable, which was the final warning. I knew we should stop then, but nothing had happened so far, so I didn't say anything. When it came to Amos's turn in the 6th round, he picked up the card and froze. He looked really scared. He showed us the card, which read, "Why aren't Zoe, Amos, Elliot, and Dennis, me, stopping?" That was the icing on the creepy cake. We packed up the game and threw it out the window. The rest of the night was tense. No one mentioned anything about the game. When it came to 10 p.m., everyone started leaving. Soon I was alone, still creeped out. I walked to my room and sat down. I locked the doors and windows to be safe and went to sleep. I was woken up at 1 a.m. by my phone ringing. I picked it up and checked the number, 67281209, the number from the first game. I didn't answer. Throughout the night, I kept getting calls. Eventually at 5 a.m., I picked up. "Hello?" I can hear you breathing. Is this some weird advertising strategy your company is doing? It's really creepy, you know? Okay, I'm going to hang up. Screaming. I hung up then, overwhelmed with shock and fear. Since then, I've been getting daily calls from the same number, but just now, it was different. It was a different number, so I picked up. Hello? Hello? In my voice. I was about to hang up, but I wanted to know more. What is your name? Dennis. Muffled laughing. I hung up. Who was the guy with my voice? I don't know, but I beg you not to play this game. It's extremely creepy and really freaks me out. I'm not sure what happens from here, but I'll update you when something else happens. What do you do when there is nothing else left? I was a college graduate who, 2 years after collecting my certification, was still unemployed. There was a gaping blank on my resume. Add to that the fact that my debts were out of control, and it's fair to say I was a mess, and growing ever more desperate. So what was I doing about this? How was I digging myself out of a hole? I was staying up all night, trawling through the internet. Is there a point at which the internet does end and sanity begins? I neither knew nor cared. I watched thousands of clips, read conspiracy theories, and news reports until they blurred into one stream of hyperbole. I slept fitfully during the day and went back online the minute I woke up. I would surf even though I needed to go to the bathroom. Until it hurt. I forgot to eat or drink, and soon I had a permanent background headache. Like a lot of addicts, it was not long before I moved on to the harder stuff. The deep web. I was sickened by a lot of what I saw, but still immersed myself more and more. When I stumbled across the site that changed my life, it looked fairly innocuous at first. There was a simple hero image of the outline of a human body and a drop-down menu in the top right-hand side that accessed 3 short lines. For other people, it's one more bet, one more drink. I clicked on one more link. I was surprised to only see 2 options, buyer and seller. I wasn't going to be buying anything real soon, so I followed the warn marked seller. This menu made my jaw drop. It listed items that could be sold and gave the price the seller would receive. All I needed to do was add details for more preferred way to receive payment, then tick the box next to the item. The first item on the list was likeness. For the price shown, I could pay the 2 months I was overdue on my rent and buy wine and pizza every night for a week with what was left over. Now I was not sure what was meant by likeness. Other items that I could sell on the website were more straightforward. Things like my social security number, my date of birth, even my name. A lot of these seemed like a way to commit fraud for the buyers. All very dubious, but at least, I thought, they were paying to use these details rather than simply stealing them, as so often happened. Likeness seemed more ethereal though. I decided it meant the right to use my image, a photograph of my face. I also decided I really wanted a beer and pizza, and to be able to tell my landlord to get off my back because I have paid your damn rent. I added my details for money transfer and ticked the box next to likeness, and hit next. A transaction processing symbol turned into a transaction complete. A new box appeared, giving me the option to comment. I typed, "Do you need me to send you my photograph?" thinking this would answer my question about what exactly I had just sold. A moment later, the reply came. We already have it. I flashed back to some of the things I had done in front of the computer screen, then decided I would rather not think about it. Feeling nervous? Sure. I was being scammed, about to kick myself for being so naive. I checked my balance. What do you know? The money was in there. I went back to the good old innocent web and ordered the largest, most overloaded pizza I could think of, then began to add sides. It took 2 weeks for me to blow my money from selling my likeness. I had a great time, without leaving my apartment, and I had paid no rent. Not to worry, I told myself and returned to the deep web and my new favorite website. This time, I hovered over fingerprints. 30 seconds considering, flagged a dozen dodgy things this could lead to, but it was the money I would make that made me think, whatever. I ticked and submitted. This time, 10 small boxes appeared on screen with an instruction for me to place the ends of my fingers in them, which I did, and within seconds, the transaction was complete, and within minutes, I could see that I was once again flush. Problems over. I could pay my rent and enough off a credit card to make my bank back off. In the comment box, I typed, "Thank you." The reply was almost immediate. "You are welcome." Now, I don't know if anyone reading this is a gambler, but I guess if you are, you would put a lot of money on me for not spending the money wisely. And you would be right. This time, I told myself another couple of weeks later, I would get my act in gear. I spent significant time going through the items I could sell and created a spreadsheet with how much I owed. So I knew the amount I needed to earn with this one final sale of part of me. I had decided, you see, that this had to be the last time. There was a relatively small number of things left I could sell, that I was prepared to sell. My name, date of birth, and social security number were still no-goes. I did not want to risk losing the ability to have a bank account and find employment. A history of being a disaster did not mean, in my mind, that I always would be. So one final sale it was, then clear my debts and find a job. I ticked the box next to sell body part. From the next list, ticked kidney. I was close to hyperventilating when I pressed next. Close to tears not long after when I checked my balance. I felt a huge pressure being lifted. With this money, I could finally get my life back on track. The comment box already had a text in it. I had been too worked up to read it, so I took a deep breath and did. It was an 8-digit reference number, an address, and a time later that day. An appointment for me to have my kidney removed. I figured. I considered not going. I already had the money, so why bother? Then I thought back to the message telling me they already had my photograph. Whoever ran the website probably knew where I lived as well, or could easily find out. It was not rocket science to work out that they were probably bad people, criminals, some kind of gang, not people to cross or mess with. I felt sick as I left the apartment at the prospect of having an operation, but also elated at the amazing things lying ahead for me. I just needed to get this over with. The address turned out to be a nondescript building on the outskirts of town. The windows were all shuttered and there was no signage. Just a human outline I recognized from the website. A keypad was fixed into the wall next to a sturdy looking door. Not sure what else to do. I entered my reference number. The door slid open with a sigh. My stomach doing backflips. I stepped inside. I could hear the drone of an air conditioner, but still suddenly felt very hot. Nerves. I told myself. Totally natural. I seemed to be in some kind of reception area, but it was deserted. Scratch that. A man appeared. He was wearing a white overall and mask and safety glasses. He may or may not have been smiling when he said, "Welcome. Let's get you prepped." I followed him along the corridor. The walls were blank, whitewashed, and the smell of antiseptic was growing strong. Eventually, he turned off into a small windowless room. I hesitated on the threshold. There was a raised table, fluorescent strips overhead, a stack of equipment next to the bed. Medical, I guessed, though I had no idea. "Please," the man said as he gestured that I should come in. I smiled weakly and did. He gave me a robe to put on and turned to do something to the equipment while I got changed. I assumed I needed to lie on the table, and when he looked around from whatever he was doing, he said, "Good." Made me feel like a dog rolling over and playing dead. But I kept this to myself. I did though have some questions. "Is this safe?" I asked. "Perfectly," he replied without missing a beat. I wasn't sure. I felt hot to the point where I thought I was going to faint, and the lighting overhead was flickering, making paint start to flow above my eyes. "I'm not sure I want to go ahead with this," I said. "There is nothing to be concerned about," he replied, and, before I realized what was happening, had nicked the skin of my neck with a needle. I immediately felt an unpleasant tingling sensation, and numbness began to spread up into my face. He picked up a tablet computer that was resting among the equipment and studied it for a moment before turning back to look at me and asking, "Now, which eye would you like to keep?" "What?" I exclaimed, or tried to, because my lips were numb and the word came out slurred. "What are you talking about?" I managed. "I sold one of my kidneys, not my eyes." I did not wait for an answer. I was horrified and decided I wanted out of there. I tried to sit up, but the numbness had spread to my spine, and then my arms. I was helpless to do anything but lie there and watch as he once more studied the tablet. No, he said in a quiet, relaxed voice. "The records show that you agreed to sell a body part, but did not specify which one." I clicked kidney. I tried to say, but now my mouth would not move and I could not feel my tongue. I could feel my heart beating faster and faster. Felt like I could not breathe. Cold sweat trickling down into my eyes, blurring my vision. I could see this. I could not feel it. I wanted to scream, wanted to cry out in terror, but my jaws were locked. My limbs were useless. All I could do was watch as the scalpel came into view as he lowered it slowly towards my left eye. "It will be all over soon," he said, and then the blade became a shadow over my eye, a darkness that was soon all I could see. That was then. This is now. I am writing this in an internet cafe, after trashing my laptop's hard drive and ditching it. There's just me in here and the owner. I think he would like me to leave from the dirty looks he is giving me. But before I head off, I have one more thing to do. I have enough money to buy a coach ticket and go a long way from here, away from everything and everyone I have ever known. I have just logged onto the site and found what I am looking for in the seller menu. Name, date of birth, social security number. I click sell on all three, enter the details into the box that pops up, press submit, and moments later, the money is in my account. I have been taking out as much cash as I can daily, and after I go across the road to the ATM and withdraw the last amount, I will snap my card in half and throw it away. This will be a fresh start. The past wiped clean, left behind. I'm going to stop writing now and go. It's time to log off for good and make my escape. Only the screen has changed. The comment box has opened up, and a new message has appeared. We like and follow you. I feel tears begin to flow from the eye they did not take. My first love was an old lampshade. My first serious relationship, I would say, was with a Chase lounge in an apartment I rented in my early 20s. My name is Alan. I am an objectum sexual. I am sexually attracted to inanimate objects. I know that sounds strange, that a lot of you will be laughing at me or dismiss me as a freak, but this is the way my heart has led me. I am 38 now, and like most people in this shallow age, love has fitted in and out of my life. Until last week, when I met the one. I was at a secondhand bookshop. I am a vociferous reader of horror, and according to a sign in the window, the shop specialized in the bizarre, so I was hopeful of finding some gems as I browsed among the paperbacks, with their faded and torn covers showing blood and cleavage and fangs and claws. Shelves crammed with books rose almost to the ceiling, and magazines with equal lurid covers were stacked here and there on the floor. Around one corner, I almost walked into a life-size model of a skeleton, and smiled at the sight of the plastic bat someone had somehow hung inside its ribcage, like a B-movie macabre ship in a bottle. I was happy. I remember that so clearly. Happy with the simple things in life. Then it hit me. Cupid's arrow. Love at first sight. Call it what you will. Its wood was cracked and dusty. The numbers and letters and handful of words on its surface were faded and indistinct. But none of that mattered. Shortly afterwards, I brought the Ouija board home. Now I know what I'm writing here is hard to believe. And I get that. I am responsible and intelligent. I am a chartered surveyor. I have an excellent healthcare plan. The mortgage on my comfortable apartment will be fully paid off in 7 years. I have a pension and plan to retire at 55. I also did not believe in ghosts or the other side, or that the Ouija board that now took pride of place in my front room was anything more than a beautiful object that I loved. And yet, still took out the small silver cup which the shopkeeper had said accompanied it, inverted the cup and placed it in the center of the board, placed the forefinger of my right hand on the base of the cup and asked, "Do you love me?" Of course I was not expecting an answer. I was being frivolous. My entire arm twisted and my hand slid to one side of the board. My finger felt like there was something holding it in place. Some force. What the hell? I thought, and looked down to where the cup had ended up. It was on the word no. I tried to smile, tried to laugh it off, but I was suddenly feeling bad. "But I love you," I said morosely. "Will you ever love me?" Again, my arm was gripped, was taken out of my control, and this time, I slid the cup involuntarily up to the individual letters, and as it moved over them, N-E-V-E-R was spelled out. I have no problem admitting I began to cry. In the space of a few hours, I had fallen deeply in love and had my heart broken. Over the days that followed, I could not sleep. I could not eat. I kept crying until my eyes hurt, and then I cried some more. On a gray winter morning, I walked up to the Ouija board and sat next to it. Love, I think, is a kind of addiction, and sometimes the only way out is to go cold turkey. I would take the Ouija board back to the shop and walk away. The cup remained where it had come to rest on the letter R. I placed my finger on it. "I will always love you," I said, "but I'll let you go." A by now horrible familiar sensation overtook me and the cup began to slide. I watched fascinated and horrified as it spelled out WHOAREYOU. I hesitated. I was confused and shocked, but I finally answered in a quiet voice. "My name is Alan." The cup began to move again. Its progress faster this time. WHATAREYOU. I smiled sadly. A man who fell in love. The moment I said this, the pressure holding my finger down increased sharply, painfully. I was more helpless than ever as the cup traced out just 4 letters this time. EVIL. No, I protested. Love is the most beautiful thing. My arm locked tight against my shoulder. The pain in my finger increased and the cup resumed its progress. "Please," I said. "YOU. Don't. ARE. This is really hurting me. EVIL." The board began to shake. I was trapped and scared. The shaking grew and soon the board was rattling uncontrollably. Sweat trickled ice cold down my back as I grew more and more afraid. It felt like I could not breathe. Then as suddenly as it began, the violent motion of the board stopped. I sat there gasping, hoping desperately that it was over. That I would be released from the nightmare I had found myself in. Instead, the cup began to move. It crossed the board for a long time. As best I can, this is my recollection of the words formed. "I do not understand the place I am in. All is dark and all was silent until you spoke. You creature of evil, for what else could you be? Sent to torment me in my purgatory, but I will overcome. I will escape from the supernatural dungeon with no walls, no bars, no end. I will find you and I will burn you as I burnt all those who were evil, who I condemned. Witches aplenty met their fate, crackled fine in the fires of my making. I do not remember the cup falling still, and I must have passed out because I came to lying on the floor next to the Ouija board. My finger was hurting like hell, and when I looked at it, I saw it was badly burned. So bad, my fingerprint was seared off. It was growing dark outside. Hours had passed since I sat next to the Ouija board and tried to say goodbye. That was 3 days ago. I agonized over what to do. I could not bear to destroy the Ouija board. No matter how worried I was that I'd once more be trapped in communication with the being that had spoken to me through it. Worried sick that somehow it would find a way to escape, to cross over and unleash its obscure hatred on the world. I could not take it back to the shop. What if someone else bought it for their own reasons, and they experienced what I had? So I made a decision. There is a strong box in the vault of a bank where my true love lies. Forever. Shout out to my superfans, Sweet Black Swan, Casey, and Brooklyn. I really appreciate you guys supporting my channel, and I really look forward to making more content for everyone.